Welcome to Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury.
Hey everybody, welcome into an all-new episode of Resilience and Resolve with attorney Lance Drury. I'm your host, Mike Leon. For decades, Lance has represented taxpayers against the IRS and built a law practice that really grew far beyond a one-lawyer shop. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest turning points for any attorney, knowing when it's time to hire somebody to give you some help. Going from that solo practice to leading a team, it's not easy, but it's often the only way to keep serving clients at a high level. Lance knows all about it. He's just going to help us break that down in just a second. Lance, it's so good to see you as always. Why don't you take us back? Let's go back in the time machine here. When you first opened your doors, how long were you practicing completely on your own?
That's a good question. I opened up my own office about 1998. And I don't know that I hired a legal assistant right away, but I did. And, so it might have been a year or two after I was in business for myself. But it's great to be here, Mike. Great to see you. Great to meet you. And, it's really hard to say when that was because I was going back and forth with a legal assistant and would try to do it on my own sometimes.
Anytime you start a response with 19, yes, it's probably a while back, right, Lance? So let me ask you, what was a sign, if you can remember, what was a sign that told you, hey, you know what? I got to hire somebody. I need to bring in somebody to help me here.
Well, I can tell you two different signs. The first time was I'd had a lot of bad luck with legal assistants. And so I thought I'm going to do this on my own. Well, it was not uncommon for me back in the late 90s to pick up the phone, talk to somebody on the phone while I'm shuffling papers and while I'm trying to use the copying machine at the same time. And so I was just overwhelmed and I knew I had to get somebody in there. And so I finally did, and I brought this lady in, and this was the second time. And I think she was just a glorified receptionist. She had a great resume. And when she came late for the initial interview on a Saturday when I wanted to interview her, she was 15 minutes late, which should have been a red flag for me. But I hired her anyway, and she couldn't do anything. I was paying her time and a half to work overtime every day because she could do in 10 or 11 hours what a normal legal assistant could do in 2 hours. So that was my red flag that I had to get somebody else in there. So I'm up at the courthouse one day, and a woman who had worked for me back in the 90s was excellent. She talked about she probably was going to leave the prosecutor's office. And I thought, oh, this is my chance because she was just excellent. She's still with me. She's getting ready to retire in the spring. But, I thought about it and I told her I'd call her and on a Friday and we do it. Well, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm freaking out. You got to understand now my overhead every month is $250,000 or less. Back then it wasn't that big. It's just me and I've got like a tenth of the cases I have now. And so at 4 in the morning, I texted her and said, I just can't do this today. So I almost lost her because of that. And now when I hire people, it's not that big a deal. I'm dealing in a lot more money, but you just understand, it's a different mindset to be an entrepreneur. There's a lot of risk, and most lawyers don't want to do that. You have to think of yourself as a business person. So that's what I've done. And it's really paid off. And you have your ups and downs, but that's just the nature of being your own boss because the revenue is going to fluctuate. And right now, with the government shutdown and all of that, things are slow. But I know because I've done this for so long, it's going to come back and it's going to be bigger than ever.
Lance, let me piggyback on something you just said there. The concerns of the startup versus the concerns of now. Let's go back to when you were starting it up and you're having those night sweats as you described. Before you made that first hire, what were some of the other big concerns that you had about growing this business? Was it just adding staff? Was it something else?
Well, the thing was, I grew up in a small town, and I have to tell you, the biggest problem is that most small town lawyers don't make a lot of money. You do DWIs, you do family law, but it's not like when you go to St. Louis and you can charge $50,000 or $100,000 because there's millions of dollars at stake. Most of these people have no money, and yet they're calling you at 5 o'clock on a Friday night because guess what? That's the exchange of custody, and it doesn't happen, so they don't call. They'll call you at midnight. And so I just knew that I had to find another way. And about 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, I'm in my office at 10 o'clock at night, and I come across an ad from an attorney out in Denver, Colorado, and he was talking about tax resolution. So I ordered the books from him, and then he was doing a seminar in Tampa, Florida. I went to that, and then he started his own group. And so I was with him for a while, but I was kind of limited because I couldn't go into St. Louis. And after I learned enough marketing, I went in the office one day and I told my 3 legal assistants, I said, we're going to be in St. Louis within 30 days and we're going on the radio. We did. That was about 13 years ago, and it's just skyrocketed since then. It was the best decision I've ever made.
Lance, a moment ago, you were giving me that example of the 3 different things that you were doing all at once. And then you were like, I got to hire somebody, right? How did hiring, though, change the way you practiced law day to day? How did that help?
Well, it allows you to do things that other people can't do. The one good thing about the shutdown is I've had a lot of time to reflect on, the overall firm, the planning for the future, the vision for the future, and so I tell that they laugh at me in the office sometimes, but I tell them I should not be doing anything in this office that somebody else can do as good as I. And I have a lot of great practitioners. So I don't deal with the IRS. They have a lot of experience. I should be looking at the big issues, planning for the future, what we're going to do with the offices, how we're going to get there, how we're going to market. We're making adjustments in marketing because everything changes. And I got to tell you, Mike, I might be an old dog, but if you don't learn new tricks, you're going to be out on the streets. And the other thing is, I'm getting to AI now, and I'm getting it to my assistants because these bar associations are telling you if you don't keep up, you may be by the wayside by the end of next year if you don't go after that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And piggybacking on that, do you remember a moment when you thought, maybe it was the AI part, but do you remember a moment when you thought we should have been doing this sooner as a firm?
Oh, absolutely. I've thought about that all the time. In fact, my media guy asked me one night when we went out to dinner in Nashville, Tennessee. He flew in because his daughter lives there, and I have an office there, and drove down from Ste Genevieve, which is an hour south of St. Louis. And I said, "Oh yeah, I wish I had known about this because this is a niche. Nobody wants to do it. Probably 1% or less of attorneys, and so." And the IRS is probably the most terrifying agency in the federal arsenal. So people are willing to pay big bucks because they don't want to deal with them, and I don't blame them. And some people think this is easy, so they call the IRS themselves, and they just absolutely screw it up. Mike, when I was just a small town practitioner, I did 15 hours of continuing legal education a year. Now myself and all of my 7 other attorneys, we do 50 to 100 hours or more every year just keeping up on this because everything changes. And it's not only that, we know the status that the IRS is in. And right now, they are so screwed up that everything is taking longer than normal. And the people in their automated collection system, half of them don't know what they're talking about because they're not properly trained. Now, if a layperson calls them up, they don't know that. That's why you need professional assistance because we know, and what we do then is, well, I just tell them I got somebody waiting in the lobby to talk to me. I hang up, then I call back until I get somebody that knows what they're talking about. But I really don't talk to the IRS hardly at all anymore because I've got other people that can do that. I've got other things that I need to do, and setting the vision for the future is with that. I'm involved in succession planning now. I know you find that hard to believe, Mike, because I'm only 72 years old and I hope to be working 10 more years, but I got to prepare for that because some of my legal assistants, at my age, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So we got to be prepared for those contingencies.
Yeah. No, very well said. And Lance, it funnels into my follow up because there's a difference, and maybe you can kind of explain the difference on your perspective between hiring to, let's say, relieve areas of pressure versus hiring to grow the firm strategically. Can you kind of explain the differences and where you've wandered in either direction?
Well, yeah, I think at the outset, I just hired to get somebody in there to relieve the pressure on me. And that's not always the wisest choice in the world. But you got to learn from your mistakes. And one of those, and I had a leadership class at the beginning of last year for like 16 weeks from January through April. And if I come away with nothing else, it was to hire remotely. And so I have no adversity anymore to hiring remotely. I hired a headhunter in Texas who could get, and I got 3 people for the price of 2 because I hired the brother of one. They're all excellent. They all work remotely. Amir works day and night and weekends, and it was well worth the price. And they were very reasonable. And they have a lot more experience than I could get here. So that's growing the firm strategically as well as they can work remotely. And Amir in San Antonio, he's opened the Houston, Texas office, which has now been open since before the end of October. And we're starting to go down there, but it's going to be a virtual office. That's the way of the future because the brick and mortars just cost you an arm and a leg and overhead, but we will go in. I go to St. Louis almost every Saturday just to meet people in person, but I bring all the work back to Ste Genevieve. Yeah. So Lance, you got to do your hiring from a strategic view. And when you start out, you got to remember, I really didn't have any marketing background in terms of that. So a lot of it was trial and error. And that's why a lot of attorneys don't want to have to worry about that. But then they're limiting themselves in their growth. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to help as many people as possible. And that means I've got to give up some of the grunt work, which doesn't bother me, to do what I consider the fun stuff, which is the marketing, which is growing the firm, which is doing a lot of the high dollar initial consults. And that's what I like about what we're doing now, because we have over 1,000 clients now at any one time. The day's going to come when we're going to have 2,000, 3,000 clients at any one time.
Lance, it's a phenomenal story. And as we wrap on this episode, for the lawyer out there right now, they're listening to you. They're still solo in their practice. What should they ask themselves before they make this leap of trying to grow their practice?
Well, I think they have to look at whether or not they're actually making a good living. I know a lot of solo practitioners in the country who don't make a whole lot of money. And I even know some who have had tax issues with the IRS. And if they're content with that's fine. But if they want to grow the business, they're going to have to take this leap of faith. Not everything you're going to do is going to be right. Not everything you're going to do is going to be correct. You're going to make mistakes along the way. If you're not making mistakes, you're not taking enough risk. And the big thing is you've got to grow from your mistakes. You got to learn from your mistakes. And if you keep plugging away, if you're resilient and if you have enough resolve, you'll find a way.
That's the way to land the plane. Lance, thank you as always for the time and insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Great to see you.
And that has been another installment of Resilience and Resolve with Lance Drury. For more resources or you want to connect with the team directly, do me a favor, visit lancedrurylaw.com today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.